Hey everyone, so we released a number of setting guides at the beginning of Valorant, and although those are still fairly accurate, we thought it would be helpful to create an updated guide since Valorant has been out for almost a year and a half now, and maybe things have changed. They've added a few new settings, and we've gotten some more information on how everything works, and we feel it would be great for us to go through all of those settings and talk about how they might impact your game, so that you know what to turn on and off to get the maximum performance on your rig. So if that sounds like what you clicked on the video for, sweet. Let's get into it. First up, we have multi-threaded rendering. Every graphics card and GPU has a certain amount of cores in it, and these cores help to improve your performance. By turning multi-threaded rendering on, you're capable of using more of your GPU and CPU's resources to help enhance your performance. For my personal PC, my FPS ran in a low 300s on the A site of Ascent when multi-thread rendering is turned on. When it's turned off, my FPS drops down to the high 200s, and sometimes it could go as low as 210 and 220 at times. With that being said, it's a no-brainer to turn this feature on if it's supported by your system. There's no particular visual effects with the settings, but it helps to drastically improve your FPS. Following that, we have materials quality, which determines how many pixels get encoded into your GPU's shaders. Higher material quality equals higher details on objects in the game. Note how when we have the material quality set to low, Jet's left hand has a much darker shades compared to when the material quality is set to high, which results in her hand having much brighter shades. This is a similar result when looking at the red artisan foil between the two settings. If we look at the crate with the material quality high versus low, there is much more detail noted with the material quality at high. Most modern GPUs are capable of running multiple shaders in succession, and as a result, material quality doesn't affect frames all that much. However, lower-end GPUs won't be able to accomplish this as efficiently, and as such, you may find yourself taking more of an FPS hit. When mentioning modern GPUs, we're referring to the latest AMD Radeon RX series and from NVIDIA GTX 3000 series. With these graphics cards, you won't notice much of a performance hit with setting this to high. Most players likely have a GPU that is on the lower end of these cards though, so we suggest setting this to low to prevent a significant performance hit. Speaking of performance, if you want to drastically improve your performance and up your competitive ranking fast in Valorant, then make sure to check out SkillCapped.com for more comprehensive guides that will help you climb the ladder in no time. We have lots of other courses going into the best video and sound settings as well as the best ergonomics for aiming. It's not only just about maximizing your aim, it's also about optimizing all other aspects of your play to help you climb as fast as possible. It's also backed by our rank improvement guarantee, so if you don't improve, you'll get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Be sure to check out skillcapped.com, link in the description below. Moving on from that, we have texture quality. Now we found that this setting doesn't really have all that much of an effect on the visual aspects of the game, rather it has more of a performance effect for players who don't have much video RAM. This refers to the dedicated video memory on your graphics card. Typically, Valorant players set their default texture quality to what it deems is appropriate based on your PC specs. We found that it didn't have all that much of an impact on performance, but those with particularly lower end cards which have lower video RAM will want to turn this off to give them a bit more FPS. Overall though, the difference is pretty minuscule and it didn't do much of anything. Now moving on, we have detail quality. This is actually one of the few settings that can improve performance on all machines regardless of what specs you have. As the name suggests, detail quality affects how many details and objects are in the game. For example, continuing on A site of Ascent with detail quality set to high, you'll notice that there are multiple rocks scattered around the site. With the settings turned down to low, you'll notice that all of these rocks have disappeared, and along with that, there was a level of detail on the bottom of the stairs that was also removed when detail quality was put to low. With more objects rendered, having detail quality put on high will affect your performance, and overall leads to more distractions in the game that can hinder your gameplay as well. Overall, we suggest just putting the settings to low for an FPS boost and improve your focus on more important areas of the game, such as finding your enemies and aiming. Going into UI quality now, this setting didn't affect too much in terms of the visuals in-game. Particularly, it only really affects the UI on the top of the game that identifies the players alive on each side. With UI quality set to high, you'll notice that the background behind the UI will be more blurred off, versus if you set this to low, the background will remain as it is without effect of the blur. This setting didn't make a significant impact on the game, so it really is just down to your personal preference. If the blur helps you have more clearer vision of the players on the UI, then set it to high. If the blur seems to be more of an annoying thing for you, then set it to low. Vignette is a setting that darkens the corners of your screen, which will help you focus your attention primarily on the center of your screen where most of the action will be taking place. It's a very small difference, and it's actually quite difficult to notice unless you actively are looking at the corners of your game. This setting does have a small GPU performance impact, so we recommend keeping it as low as possible, as it didn't really give much assistance performance-wise. Now we have VSync, and we highly suggest turning this off unless you have issues with screen tearing. Screen tearing refers to your screen splitting up, with one part of your screen being in one frame and the other part being in another. VSync solves this issue by locking your FPS to the monitor's refresh rate. However, it comes with two big flaws in which it will negatively impact your performance, and it will increase input delay, which is the time between you pushing a button on your keyboard or mouse and it actually registering in the game. You always want to have as little input delay as possible, as those extra milliseconds can make all of the difference in who ends up shooting first in your aim duels. Another option to try before using VSync is using the FPS limiting feature. To access this, you'll go to the general section of the video tab and then turn on limit FPS always. After that, you'll want to set the max FPS always to the desired value. Optimally, this will be your monitor's refresh rate or as high as your computer can tolerate. Ideally, you'll want to set your FPS value to wherever your PC can consistently run at. Next, we have anti-aliasing. This setting helps smoothen out the jagged edges on objects in-game. For example, with this off, you'll see the jagged edges of the wooden board. Now, when we turn it on, the edges look much smoother. Now, this does come with a performance cost, so for the max FPS possible, we recommend turning this off. However, some players may feel that their aim is off when navigating different sections of the map, so if the jagged edges do bother you to a degree, we recommend turning it to MSAA 2 times to help fix a good chunk of this issue while still maintaining high performance. Next is anisotropic filtering. This adjusts how objects look that are off center of your camera or screen. Most noticeably, you can see this on the ground or with your weapons. With it turned down, you'll notice less detail on your guns and on the floor. With more textures rendered, this does come at a price of performance. However, it's arguable that the difference isn't that noticeable or significant when you're actually playing the game. How many times have you watched a YouTube video or streamer and go, "Oh my god, those textures look awful, he must have this set very low"? Probably not that often. As a result, we recommend going for the performance boost and turning this down to 1x. Going forward, we have improved clarity. This setting is described as increasing contrast in midtones to help give you a clearer picture. This feature can be hard to notice, but with improved clarity on, you'll notice certain walls and areas are actually brighter and have more contrast compared to with it off, where these spots are darker. It is a fairly minute difference though, and this setting does actually result in a small performance hit, particularly if you are GPU bound. We recommend players simply turn this off for optimal FPS. Now we have experimental sharpening, and this is one of those newer settings. Like the name suggests, this helps sharpen up your graphics. For example, you'll notice that these stairs on ascent are clearer to the eye with experimental sharpening on versus with it off. It's a setting that won't be too noticeable for most players, and it does come at a performance hit, so we recommend turning this off. If the blurriness of certain objects does bug you and you're more CPU bound, turning this on is an option that is viable if it helps you with properly identifying where the players are. Otherwise, turning this off is definitely the wave. Our next setting is bloom, and no, we're not talking about Fortnite bloom here. In Fortnite, that feature is a nightmare, but in Valorant, bloom on helps to make objects brighter and appear more vibrant and realistic. For example, with Sova's bow, you can see how much the weapon glows with bloom on, and then with it off, the bow looks just a bit more dull and boring. It appears just blue, and there's no glow or shine to it. This feature does come at a performance cost, so you'll notice that most pro players have bloom turned off, and we suggest that you do the same to give you more FPS and the most competitive advantage. Now we go to distortion, and this feature is meant to create a blur effect with certain weapons in areas of your screen. This is to help you focus on more of the important parts, such as the center where you need to aim your crosshair at your targets. This is most noticeable with sniper rifles while using the scope. You'll notice that the area around the perimeter of the scope will be just a little bit more blurred and deformed when distortion is on, and with it off, you'll notice that everything in the scope is clear. This feature comes at a performance cost, and honestly, having it out seems to cause more problems than solutions. The distortion effect seems to throw players off more than it helps them, as they now have a blurred section of their scope that can make it harder to hit a flick when scoped in if the enemy comes into vision on that part of the scope. As a result, for both a performance and a competitive benefit, we suggest turning this feature off. And then last but not least, on the graphics quality section, we have cast shadows. Now for some players, including myself, you may have thought that this setting would cast a shadow for enemy models, which would give you a competitive advantage if the shadow allowed you to discover a player's position. That is not what this setting does at all though. Casting shadows will place a shadow only on the first person player's weapons and arms, meaning that it only affects how you visually see your weapon and character model. As a result, it doesn't really provide a competitive advantage and can even do the opposite. Casting shadows really just affects looks for yourself, and the shadows can be a bit distracting for some players, thus taking away focus from the crosshair and aiming at enemies. With the big settings out of the way though, we are moving on to the general section with a few quality of life improvements that can help ease your gameplay. First is the map settings. You can set your map to rotate, meaning that as you change directions in the game, the map will also turn with you. This versus fixed, where the map will just stay stationary regardless of which direction you're facing on the map. This setting is largely preference, and it'll really depend on the player what they use. Dr. Zora is the one who wrote this guide, and he suggests turning it to rotate, but I'm a player who can't stand when my map is rotating, so I set mine to fixed. The other big setting is Minimap vision cones, and this creates a visual field indicating what each of your teammates is seeing, and you definitely want to keep this on so that you can keep tabs on what vision every player has. Other than that, there are a few self-explanatory settings here. Minimap size changes the size of your map, and then minimap zoom will change how zoomed in your map is. The most popular settings for this are size 1.1 and zoom 0.9. It gives you a good amount of vision without taking too much or too little of your screen. Lastly, a few settings that you want to have on are show blood, which will help you identify if you hit an enemy or not, and then show bullet tracers is a must turn on. Bullet tracers are a great way to help you keep track of where your bullets are landing and control your sprays better, so turning it off would just leave you at a disadvantage. Finally, we have sound settings. The biggest settings to take note of here are the VoIP Dux music and enable HRTF, which should both be on. The music decreases the game's music volume when the team or party chat is audible, and essentially this helps you clearly hear your teammates' comms so that you don't miss any crucial information. Enable HRTF helps create better 3D spatialization sounds, meaning that you can better hear all in-game sounds and where they are located. This setting could be the difference between whether or not you hear a player properly or not, so we definitely recommend setting this to on. And other than that, that's all of the settings we're going over today. Hopefully this was helpful for you all to figure out what some of these settings do and whether or not you should set these to on or off. If this was helpful, we highly recommend checking out our FPS boost guide. Although one of our older guides, we still get comments like every single day about players telling us they gained nearly 100 FPS from watching that video. And lastly, don't forget, if you're really looking to optimize all aspects of your play, be sure to check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. As always, my name is King, and we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.